It's now my pleasure to introduce our student speakers for today's ceremonies. We'll be hearing from two of our graduates this afternoon, each of them elected by their classmates to speak today, one representing the JD class and the other the LLM program. Speaking first will be our JD graduate, Courtney Finerty. Start to come up, Courtney, but I've got some bragging words to say. Courtney graduated Phi Beta Kappa from Cornell's College of Arts and Sciences, where she majored in psychology. She was a very accomplished and dedicated student at the law school, serving as editor-in-chief of the International Law Journal, member of the Moot Court Board, honors fellow for the lawyering program, a participant in the LGBT and in the International Human Rights Clinics. Last summer, she worked for the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department for Justice. Following graduation, Courtney will serve as a law clerk to the Honorable Raymond Dearie in the United States District Court for the Eastern District of New York. Please join me in welcoming our JD speaker, Courtney Finerty.
My first memory as a Cornell Law student is indelibly etched into my mind. It was a few nights before the start of classes, and I had arrived in Ithaca, purchased my textbooks, lined them up evenly on my desk, and began working through the first day's reading assignments. Eventually, I came to Professor Claremont's civil procedure class. With a sense of nervous anticipation, I turned to the first case, Sibak v. Wilson. 5 minutes later, I was overcome with sheer panic. All I could think was, what does that mean? Several rereadings later, why can I not figure out what that means? The next thought, what have I done? Forget about succeeding in law school or surviving the next 3 years. How am I going to get through the next week? But I did get through the next week and the next 3 years. We all did. And the reason we were able to make it is because of everyone in this room. President Skorton, Dean Schwab, the administration, our professors, our friends, our families, each other. And although these years at Cornell Law School were some of the most challenging, they were also some of the most rewarding. So I want to take this opportunity as your convocation speaker, an honor that I'm incredibly grateful to have, to reflect on these 3 years and talk about 3 lessons I learned as a Cornell Law student. Lesson 1. The beginning and end of a journey are nice, but it's the middle part that counts. The panic I felt after reading Sibak was the reality of being a law student setting in. I had a clear idea in my mind of what I had set out to do and what I wanted to achieve in the end, but I had no idea about the middle part. But it's those in-between days, the days that make up the majority of our lives, where we are simply presented with the unglamorous task of putting in the effort to accomplish our goals, that are the most important. In the case of law school, it meant the often tedious and tiring process of going to class, staying up in the library for way too long, hanging out with friends, making the familiar trip from Myron Taylor Hall to CTB, writing things on the class listserv we would later regret, or, in my case, trying to prevent someone very close to me from writing to the listserv, and getting up the next day to do it all over again. But it was also during those days that we achieved our greatest work, formed our most important friendships, and created the bridge between where we started and being in this room today. Lesson 2. Rely on those around you. You need them. Needless to say, some of the in-between days were incredibly difficult. The first year in particular felt like it was specially designed to produce the maximum amount of self-doubt and stress. In my opinion, its most horrifying feature is the cold call, when a professor asks you a series of questions about any argument you manage to muster until you fall off a logical cliff. At least that's how the more respectable cold call blunders went. My downfall was simple arithmetic. I was in Professor Hillman's contract class, and I didn't know it at the time, but I made a crucial error. I sat myself next to Ryan Buffkin. And little did I know, Ryan had strategically scribbled his name on the seating chart so that it was illegible. So when Professor Hillman went to call on Ryan, what happened was, Mr. I can't read this name, I'll just call on the next person. And while I was in the middle of thinking how awful for that next person, I heard a resounding Miss Finerty. To make matters worse, I was then asked a series of questions that required math. I knew the numbers I needed. I knew I just had to add them together. But what came out was, yes, Professor Hillman, you just take this number, add it to that number, and then my mind went blank. I was in front of 100 of my new peers, and I could not get my brain to do the math. As a 3L, my answer would have been Mr. Buffkin. His name is Mr. Buffkin. But I was a nervous 1L, so instead I just left class feeling sure that everyone thought I was incompetent. However, it was on those difficult days that everyone in this room made things better, and when we as students began to form unbreakable bonds with one another. It's those days that make me proud to be part of the class of 2013. Yes, we are type A, argumentative, and competitive. For example, when I walked by Cody Hirsch's carrel, pasted to the wall, he had an index card with the following quote: "Somewhere he is working while you are not. And when you meet, he will win." And whether or not we'd like to admit it, we can all relate, or at least I can, especially because Cody was working while I was not, and he won. But we are also compassionate, driven, and loyal. We have made some of our best friends here, friends who we spend a ridiculous number of hours with every day, friends who pick us up on our worst days, celebrate our best days, friends who know what it means to be sitting here today because they were right there with us the entire time. Also on the difficult days were, of course, our families and friends. And on the subject of families, today is Mother's Day, so I wanted to share a story of my own mother's support that she's actually hearing for the first time. I was having another what have I done moment when serendipitously I came across an interview my mom had given. In it, she gave advice to her daughters and young people planning their futures. Spend time working on things you think are worthwhile. That will make a difference, she said. And don't be afraid of new challenges. It was exactly what I needed to hear, and just like my mother, to say the right thing without even knowing she had said it. This is the support that you, our families and friends, have provided us. You are the people we called when things seemed too hard, who reminded us that our self-worth isn't tied to our success here, who told us that you loved us no matter what. You are why we were able to make it to this day, and we cannot thank you enough. Lesson 3, always remember the bigger picture. For me, the in-between day that stands out the most is Professor Holden Smith's last day of civil procedure class. And it makes sense that such a day would involve one of our professors. They are the people who demanded excellence and pushed us to our intellectual limits, who spent hours crafting insane hypotheticals that we had to answer in an impossibly short amount of time, who taught us how to write. They are the people who dedicate their lives to making sure we have the tools we need to succeed in this profession. And on the last day of class, Professor Holden Smith took the time to remind us that there is a broader sense of justice that one doesn't need a legal degree to understand, and that the law must conform to that sense of justice rather than the other way around. The words she read to remind us of this came from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from a Birmingham jail. He wrote, "At first glance, it may seem rather paradoxical for us consciously to break laws. One may well ask, how can you advocate breaking some laws and obeying others? The answer lies in the fact that there are two types of laws, just and unjust. I would be the first to advocate obeying just laws. One has not only a legal but a moral responsibility to obey just laws. Now, what is the difference between the two? Any law that uplifts human personality is just. Any law that degrades human personality is unjust. Professor Holden Smith ended her class by saying, "Lawyers have an awesome power in our society. In 2 short years' time, you will have that power, and you will have a choice of what to do with it. I hope," she continued, "that no matter what career path you take, you choose to use some of that power who help those who do not have power in our society. Because one of the wonderful things about this career is that you can really use it to make a difference." Now that those 2 short years have passed, I've been thinking a lot about the awesome power we are about to have, what that means. To me, it means that we have the ability to make the actual law fuse with the just law. So even though Professor Holden Smith's last lecture touched upon something that made sense before coming to law school, as lawyers, we are positioned to actually achieve that cohesion. And that truly is an awesome power, so it makes sense that it's so very hard to obtain. The wonderful part, though, is that we're about to graduate and obtain it. Now we just have to spend the next set of in-between days working on the cohesion part. And I can't think of a better group of people to go out and do it. Thank you.